Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. In retrospect, it's remarkable just how dishonest, how thoroughly and intentionally dishonest the media coverage of the Kyle Rittenhouse story turned out to be. All of it was a lie. Rittenhouse was not a white supremacist. He was never in a militia. He never crossed state lines with a firearm. The protest in Kenosha was not peaceful. It was a riot, chaotic and violent. Many of the rioters, by the way, carried guns. Rittenhouse was hardly alone. Rittenhouse didn't go to Kenosha looking for trouble. His father lived there. Rittenhouse himself worked as a lifeguard in Kenosha. On August 25th of last summer, Rittenhouse went downtown to stand guard over a car lot. Here's the context. The night before, police in Kenosha had done nothing as the mob burned businesses, including another car lot, all the way to the ground. So the business owner needed Kyle Rittenhouse's help. He was looking to a 17-year-old for help, if that gives you some perspective on how bad things were, and he asked for it. As Rittenhouse stood there, rioters threatened his life. Then they attempted to kill him. In the end, Rittenhouse shot 3 attackers as he tried to run to the safety of the police. A number of media outlets claimed the men Rittenhouse shot were black. In fact, all 3 were white, and all 3 had serious criminal records. We could go on. Again, the media coverage was, from beginning to end, a tapestry of lies. If you watched the trial last week, you know that. But what about Kyle Rittenhouse himself? What is he like? Apart from his testimony in court, few Americans have ever heard his voice. Over the next hour, we're going to let Kyle Rittenhouse speak for himself. You can make up your own mind what you think. But before we start, one observation, which you can't resist making. It's hard to ignore the yawning class divide between Kyle Rittenhouse and his many critics in the media. Rittenhouse comes from the least privileged sector of our society. During high school, he worked as a janitor and a fry cook to help support his family. Last year, he got into college at Arizona State, and he's very proud of it. In the world Kyle Rittenhouse grew up in, it is not a given that kids go to college. It's not even close. During the course of our long conversation, Kyle Rittenhouse struck us as bright, decent, sincere, dutiful, and hardworking. Exactly the kind of person you'd want many more of in your country. He's not especially political. He never wanted to be the symbol of anything. Kyle Rittenhouse just wanted to keep violent lunatics from setting fire to cars. In the America he grew up in, that was considered virtuous. So if Rittenhouse seems a little bewildered at points during our interview, thinking back over the last year and what happened to him, that's probably why. A lot of the things he assumed were true about this country turned out not to be true at all. So in that way, he speaks for many of us. Here's Kyle Rittenhouse.
When life gets busy, FSAstore.com is there to help.
Kyle, how you wound up in Kenosha that day.
Well, it actually started on August 24th. I was working my job as a lifeguard at the Recplex in Kenosha County, and then the riots were still going on and a curfew was implied. So I went to Dominic Black's house and I stayed the night over there and saw the videos of the riots and the arson going on.
What'd you think of it?
It was upsetting because Kenosha is my community, and I just was upset seeing my community up in flames.
Yeah, I bet you were. So you're at your friend's house that night. You've come back from working as a lifeguard.
Yes.
And then you decide to go in. First, you're cleaning up graffiti, correct?
Yes. So I say the night August 24th. We wake up in the morning and we're talking. We're like, let's go help our community. Let's go see what we can do. And we ended up at Rittenhouse Central High School where we were cleaning graffiti for a couple hours. And then we met with the owners of car stores and we offered to protect their business from fires, making sure the rest of their other 2 properties didn't get burned down like they did the night prior. And they agreed. We came back. We went back to Dominic's house and hung out there for a little bit. And then we went to car stores to help protect the property and make sure it didn't set on fire again.
So you get there. What do you see?
When I get there, I see in the beginning, the morning of Rittenhouse Central, I see just spray paint everywhere. I see smoke coming from the car stores that was burnt down, and it was quite upsetting. because that was somebody's business that got destroyed.
Yeah. So you said to the people who own the car lot, I want to protect your cars. And they said, yes, please.
I said, hey, if you, I asked if they needed any help, and they said, yes, if you can.
Where were the police?
I'm not sure really, because they have a hard job.
For sure.
But I didn't really think they got the support they needed. The National Guard should have been called August 23rd, but the city of Kenosha failed the community. The governor, Tony Evers, failed the community, and there should have been a lot more resources to help with that.
That's for sure. So you've been criticized for carrying a firearm into the scene, but it's obvious from the tape that a lot of people, you were not the only one with a firearm. There were rioters with firearms. Was that obvious to you?
Yes.
So you saw other people with guns?
I did. There was a lot of people on both, like there were rioters with firearms. I remember one very distinctly. Joshua Zeminski was walking around with a pistol in his hand all that night with Joseph Rosenbaum.
Where did you first see Rosenbaum?
The first time I saw Rosenbaum was the first time he threatened to kill me. It was at the corner of the car source lot that I was at primarily that night. And I was asking people if they needed medical, and he came up to me and Ryan Balch, and he said, if I catch any of you MFers alone, I'm going to effing kill you.
Had you ever seen him before?
I have not.
So you'd never seen this guy. He walks up and threatens to kill you out of nowhere.
Yes. It was quite shocking. I was like, why would somebody threaten to kill me? I'm just asking if people need help on both sides. I was there just to help anybody that needed. And shockingly, the only people I helped that night were rioters.
What kind of sense did you get from Rosenbaum? I mean, that sounds deranged.
When he threatened to kill me, I was like, what the heck just happened? I've never, nobody's ever threatened to kill me up until that point. And I was like, that's not something you say to somebody.
How long after that was it that he tried to grab your rifle?
It was about an hour and a half later. And then there was actually a second time he said to the group, he said, this is the second time he threatened to kill everybody. He said, I'm gonna effing kill you. I'm gonna cut your hearts out, you effing N-words.
Cut your hearts out?
Yes.
Did any of the rioters try and calm him down or stop him?
What I noticed is the rioters were trying to they were disassociating with him because he was spewing the N-word around, and they just didn't seem to want to have anything to deal with him, the rioters.
Yeah. So he comes, he tries to grab your rifle, he gets shot. You decide at that point, unless I'm misremembering, you want to go turn yourself into the police.
Yes. After I shoot Mr. Rosenbaum, he tried to grab my gun. I was running away. There's a gunshot behind me. After I shoot him, I run around the car because I was going to go render first aid to him. I wasn't able to because then there was a mob forming and calling for my execution to get him and kill him. And that's when I try to run to the police line and get to the police. And then I am attacked again.
By the guy who kicked you?
By Jump Kick Man, yes.
Whose identity we didn't know. It turns out the prosecution knew it and hid it.
So we found out November 7th, the prosecution, we went into the judge's chambers and the prosecution said, we identified Jump Kick Man, and the prosecution threw a fit a little bit. They didn't want us to interview him. They were like, well, he's a victim, and didn't want my investigators or my attorneys to interview him or ask him questions. They just wanted to do it private, non-recorded. And the judge said, no, it's going to be recorded. And then a couple hours later, they say, oh, he asked for immunity and we're not going to give it to him. So we're not going to be calling him as a witness.
Yeah, well, probably didn't want to talk about his criminal record.
Yeah.
So you're running, trying to get to the police lines. You see the mob coming after you. Let's execute him, they're saying. And then out of nowhere, you get dropped to the ground by the guy who kicks you in the head.
Mhm.
Did you see him coming?
I did. To backtrack a little bit, actually, as I'm running, Gage Grosskreutz came up to me with his phone and put it in my face, and he said, "What are you doing? Did you just shoot that man?" And I told him, "I'm going to the police." And he said, "Oh, okay," and ran off. And I kept running to get to the police. And that's when Anthony Huber strikes me with the skateboard as I'm running before I'm on the ground for the first time. And then I'm hit with a rock by somebody in a white tank top. And that's how I end up on the ground. And I have 4 people around me from what I remember. And I move my firearm in their direction and they back off with their hands up so I don't shoot them. And then Jump Kick Man keeps coming. And that's when I fire 2 shots at Jump Kick Man.
Wow. And you miss him and he kicks you.
Yes.
Then what happens?
After Jump Kick Man is running off, Anthony Huber comes up and he grabs the barrel of my gun and then he hits me with his skateboard holding his trucks. And that's when I shoot him 1 time.
Where did he hit you with the skateboard?
He hit me in the back of the head, in the back of the head towards the neckline.
Did you think you were going to be killed at that point?
I did.
Then what happens?
And then after Mr. Huber attacks me, Mr. Grosskreutz puts his hands up, and then I have my rifle pointed in his direction for about a second. And then once I lower my rifle, I noticed that my ejection port is opened about an inch, and Mr. Grosskreutz said I pulled the charging handle, which never happened. I hit the forward assist to close the ejection port, and he sees me doing that or something. And this time he runs at me and he has his gun pointed directly at my head.
Did you see the gun?
I did.
Do you think he was going to shoot you?
I did. He had it pointed directly at my head, and that's when I shoot him 1 time. And he is no longer a threat to me at that point because he ran off after I fired that shot.
Did you realize you hit him?
I didn't know until later.
So then what happens?
There is a person directly in front of me, and I point my rifle in their direction, and he puts his hands up, and he's backing up, and I then turn around, start going to the police, and then I hear shots behind me, and I turn around and briefly raise my rifle to see if I'm being shot at. And then I realize I can't see who's shooting at me. So then I turn around and go back to the police car, towards the police line.
It's just, hearing this, it's just hard to believe this is happening in an American city.
Yeah.
So then you finally get up, you hear shots, you turn to see who's shooting at you, and then you finally make it to the police line.
Yes. Once I make it to the police cruiser, the police officer says, "Get back, get back, get back." One of them has a gun out and the other has pepper spray pointed at me. And I say, "Hey, I just had to shoot somebody. I just had to shoot somebody." And then they say, "Go home." And I didn't know this until...
Go home?
Yeah. The officer said to go home. I don't think he knew what happened or heard me. There's a lot of chaos going on.
Yes.
But apparently he pepper sprayed me. You can see it in the video, but I don't remember being pepper sprayed by him.
So then what happened?
I say, okay, I go back to the car source lot number 2. We've been referring to them. Car source 1 is the one that got burnt down. Car source 2 is the one that I was at primarily the entire night. And car source 3 is the one where I was attacked by Mr. Rosenbaum. I go back to car source lot number 2 and I tell everybody there what happened. I said I had to do it. I was just attacked. I was dizzy. I was vomiting. I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I wanted to turn myself in Kenosha. I wanted to turn myself into the police in Kenosha, but I wasn't able to because they weren't accepting visitors apparently with the barricades and the fence up. So we ended up turning myself into the Antioch Police Department.
So you drove back across state lines, as we're now calling it. Funny, you couldn't even turn yourself in.
No, it was like I had to go to Antioch Police Department, which to my understanding is the closest police department to Kenosha.
Why do you think people were burning car source? What does that have to do with civil rights?
I don't know. I think it was opportunists taking advantage of the BLM movement. I agree with the BLM movement. I agree everybody has the right to protest and assemble, but I do not agree that people have the right to burn down. I don't appreciate that people are burning down American cities to try to spread their message. I think there's other ways to go around and do that.
Well, I agree with that completely. So you turn yourself into Annapolis. What do you think is going to happen at that point to you?
I didn't know. I was in shock. My head was spinning from being hit in the head multiple times. I had some minor injuries. I just didn't know. I didn't know I was going to be arrested for defending myself because everything was on video. But part of the reason I think I was arrested is because of the mob mentality. And they were like, yeah, we're just going to arrest him, even though there was videos already out showing me being attacked and having to defend myself.
So when was it that you were arrested?
I was arrested on August 25th at around 6 a.m. I was formally arrested without a criminal complaint being drafted. They didn't know what they were charging me with yet. They just arrested me.
At home?
At Antioch Police Department.
What'd your parents say when you called them and told them what had happened?
I didn't call my mom after I saw her, and she was in shock. She was like, she wanted to go into hiding, and I said, no, the right thing to do would be to turn myself in. I didn't do anything wrong.
So you knew that from the very beginning?
I knew that. A lot of people are like, oh, Kyle had time to meet with his attorneys to come up with this amazing defense of self-defense. No, that's not the case. This has been 100% self-defense from the beginning, and I didn't know there was 100 cameras. But I did know I was attacked, and I defended myself.
What do you think would have happened to you if there hadn't been the amount of video that there is?
I can't even imagine. I don't think we'd be sitting here right now having this talk, Tucker.
That's for sure. You'd never get out. Rittenhouse knows perfectly well the only reason he's free is because he can prove what actually happened thanks to those videos, but it didn't prevent him from going to jail anyway. He did for a longer period than most people understand. During that time, he picked up a couple of attorneys who said they would help him. In his view, they badly abused him and his family and their trust. I'll tell you a lot about that in just a minute, and about the prosecutors. Also, a programming note, we had cameras behind the scenes throughout much of this case. Our Tucker Carlson Originals documentary called The Trial of Kyle premieres in December.